My boyfriend called me selfish and possessive because I didn't let him sleep over at his best friend's house. So I got my revenge. My name is Victoria, and I should have seen the red flags 3 weeks ago when my boyfriend casually announced he was moving in with his female best friend. Not asked. Not discussed. Announced. I was folding laundry in our shared apartment on that ordinary Tuesday evening when he dropped the bomb like he was mentioning the weather forecast. The domestic scene was so normal, me sorting through our clothes while he scrolled through his phone on the couch, that his words took a moment to register. Oh, by the way, I'm going to stay at her place for a few months to help with rent. She's struggling financially and might have to move back with her parents if she can't make ends meet. I stopped mid-fold, holding one of his favorite shirts in my hands. The fabric felt suddenly heavy, like it was absorbing the weight of what he'd just said. Wait, what? When did you decide this? It's not really a decision, Vic. It's just helping a friend in need. He didn't even look up from his phone screen, thumb still scrolling through whatever social media feed had his attention. She mentioned yesterday that her job cut her hours and she might have to move back home. I can't let that happen to her. Yesterday? And you're just telling me now? My voice carried an edge I couldn't suppress, a sharpness that cut through the comfortable evening atmosphere we'd been sharing moments before. Don't you think this is something we should discuss together? As a couple? He finally looked at me then, and his expression wasn't the understanding, apologetic look I'd been hoping for. Instead, there was irritation, like I was being unreasonable for even questioning his unilateral decision. Discuss? What's to discuss, really? A friend needs help, and I'm in a position to provide it. End of story. But you're my boyfriend. We've been together for 2 years. We live together. This affects our relationship, our living situation, our future plans. I set down the shirt and turned to face him fully, hoping that direct eye contact might help him understand the gravity of what he was suggesting. Only if you make it about us instead of about helping someone who genuinely needs it. He set his phone down with deliberate force, the sound sharp against the coffee table. Look, I knew you'd react exactly like this. That's precisely why I didn't want to turn it into some big dramatic conversation with endless back and forth. The dismissive tone hit me like a physical slap. I felt my stomach drop as I realized he'd already made up his mind completely, had already anticipated my objections, and had decided they didn't matter enough to discuss beforehand. React like what? Like someone who expects her boyfriend to include her in major life decisions that affect both of us? React like someone who's selfish and possessive. The words came out sharp and final, like a judge delivering a verdict. She's my best friend, Vic. I've known her for 8 years since college. I knew her long before I knew you. If she needs help, I'm going to help her. Period. No discussion, no negotiation. I stared at him. This man I'd shared a bed with for 2 years, who knew how I took my coffee and which side of the bed I preferred, who was now calling me selfish for expecting basic communication about a decision that would fundamentally change our relationship dynamic. So you've already made up your mind completely. This conversation is just you informing me of what's happening, not actually discussing it. Pretty much. Yeah. He picked up his phone again, already dismissing the conversation. I'm moving my stuff over this weekend. Don't worry, though. I'll still pay my half of the rent here. I'm not going to leave you hanging financially. How generous of you. The sarcasm escaped before I could stop it, bitter and sharp in the quiet room. See? This attitude right here is exactly what I'm talking about. You're making this entirely about you and your feelings when it has absolutely nothing to do with you. This is about helping a friend in crisis, and you're turning it into some kind of personal attack on our relationship. But it had everything to do with me. With us, with the future. I thought we were building together. And as I watched him scroll through his phone, completely dismissing my concerns and acting like the conversation was already over, I realized our relationship had just shifted into territory I didn't recognize. The man sitting across from me felt like a stranger wearing my boyfriend's face, speaking words that sounded like him but carried none of the consideration and care I thought I knew. The next morning, I woke up determined to try one more rational approach. I made his coffee exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream, and waited for him to finish his shower before attempting to restart the discussion. Look, I understand wanting to help a friend, I said carefully, setting his coffee down beside him at our small kitchen table. I really do, but there have to be other options we could explore together. She could advertise for a roommate, or maybe we could help her with a small loan to cover the difference. Or she could look into rent assistance programs. Or a loan? He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just condescension. With what money, Vic? We're both barely making ends meet ourselves with student loans and credit card payments. And a roommate? Do you have any idea how hard it is to find someone trustworthy these days? Someone who won't steal from you or bring dangerous people around or trash the place? At least she knows I'm reliable and responsible. But moving in together? That's such a big step, such an intimate arrangement. What if it affects your friendship? Or what if it affects us? Or what if what? He interrupted, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I was beginning to hate. What if I fall madly in love with my best friend of 8 years? What if we suddenly discover some passionate romance that's been hiding under the surface all this time? He rolled his eyes dramatically. Jesus, Vic, listen to yourself. This isn't about trust in our relationship. This is about helping someone in crisis. Someone who's been there for me through thick and thin. Boundaries. He said the word like it tasted bitter in his mouth, like I'd suggested something ridiculous and offensive. You know what? She actually warned me you might react exactly like this. My blood went cold, and I felt like the floor had shifted beneath my feet. She warned you? You discussed our relationship with her? You talked about how I might respond before you even told me what was happening? Not discussed, exactly. She just knows how you can be sometimes. Clingy, needy, overly emotional about things that don't really concern you. He shrugged like he was stating a simple, obvious fact about the weather. She said you'd probably make this about yourself instead of seeing the bigger picture of someone genuinely needing help. I sat down heavily in the chair across from him, trying to process what he was telling me, trying to understand how the man I loved could be so casually cruel. So you told her I'd be upset about this before you even told me it was happening? I told her I was worried about how you'd handle it. Yeah, because I know you. I know how you get when you feel like your position is being threatened. He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed, like this was all perfectly reasonable. My feelings don't matter at all to you anymore, do they? The question came out smaller than I intended, but it felt like the most important thing I'd ever asked him. They matter when they're reasonable and proportionate to the situation. He stood up, grabbing his keys from the counter with deliberate finality. But I'm not going to let your insecurity and possessiveness stop me from being there for someone who actually needs me right now. The implication was clear. She needed him, but I was just being needy. She deserved his help, but I was being demanding. She was worthy of his loyalty, but I was just an obstacle to his goodness. I thought things couldn't possibly get worse after that conversation. I was catastrophically wrong. 3 days later, while I was sitting in my office cubicle trying to focus on quarterly budget reports and pretending my personal life wasn't imploding, my phone buzzed with a text from him. The preview notification showed it was a photo, and my stomach dropped even before I opened it, some instinct warning me that I wasn't going to like what I was about to see. There he was, shirtless and grinning, lying in what was obviously her bed. The covers were rumpled around his waist. His hair was tousled like he'd just woken up, and he was holding the camera at that casual angle that suggested complete comfort and familiarity with his surroundings. But it wasn't just the partial nudity that made my hands shake as I stared at the screen. It was the details in the background that made it feel like a deliberate invasion of my sanity. I could see her decorative pillows scattered around him, personal photos on the nightstand, the intimate details of another woman's private bedroom space. And there he was, comfortable enough to strip down and take selfies like he owned the place. The caption read, "Getting settled in. Thanks for trusting me, babe." The audacity was so breathtaking it left me speechless. I was sitting in my professional environment, surrounded by coworkers and quarterly reports, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, and my boyfriend was sending me half-naked photos from another woman's bedroom with some twisted message about trust and transparency. My hands were actually shaking when I called him, and I had to step into the supply closet to avoid my colleagues overhearing what I was sure would be a very unprofessional conversation. "Hey, babe, did you get my... Are you completely out of your mind?" My voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the fury of 1,000 storms. "Have you lost all sense of appropriate boundaries and basic respect?" "What?" "I was just being transparent, showing you there's nothing to worry about. No secrets between us." His tone was so casual, so matter-of-fact, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I might be upset. Transparent? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The logic was so twisted it made my head spin. You sent me a shirtless photo of yourself in her bed, in her private, intimate space. How exactly is that transparency and not just deliberate provocation? Because I'm showing you I have absolutely nothing to hide. If I was doing something wrong, something inappropriate or romantic, would I be sending you pictures? Would I be documenting my time here for you to see? The reasoning was so backwards, so completely divorced from reality, that I almost laughed. You're showing me that you're comfortable enough in her space to take half-naked photos. You're showing me that you think this whole situation is funny, that my concerns are so ridiculous they're worth mocking. God, Vic, everything is a conspiracy with you, isn't it? His voice was getting tighter, more frustrated. I literally cannot win with you. If I don't communicate and keep you informed, you complain that I'm being secretive. If I do communicate and show you exactly what's happening, you complain that I'm being inappropriate. What exactly do you want from me here? I want you to come home. The words came out smaller and more vulnerable than I intended. I want you to remember that you have a girlfriend who loves you and misses you and is struggling with this whole arrangement. I've been gone for 3 days. Victoria. 3 days. 3 days without any real conversation about how this is affecting us. 3 days of you acting like this is all perfectly normal and I'm crazy for having any emotional response to it. Through the phone, I could hear her voice in the background asking if everything was okay, if he needed anything. My boyfriend was discussing our relationship crisis with her in real time, probably getting her input on how to handle his unreasonable girlfriend. Is she listening to this conversation right now? She's in the same room, yes. She's concerned about the tension this whole situation is causing between us. She feels terrible that our relationship is suffering because of her financial problems. Then maybe she should have found another solution instead of accepting an arrangement that she had to know would cause problems. Or maybe you should work on your trust issues and your need to control every aspect of my life. His voice turned cold, sharp with judgment. Look, I'm trying to help someone I care about, someone who's been important to me for years. If you can't handle that basic fact, then maybe we need to have a serious conversation about what that says about us as a couple. The threat was crystal clear. Support his decision unconditionally or lose him entirely. Accept his living arrangement with another woman, or be labeled the controlling, insecure girlfriend who couldn't handle her boyfriend having female friends. I need to go, I said quietly, my voice barely audible even to myself. Vic, wait. I hung up and stared at the photo again, zooming in on the background details that made it feel like such a violation. Personal items, intimate spaces, the casual comfort of someone who belonged there. That's when I realized the game had changed completely, and I was playing by rules that had never been explained to me. I thought the shirtless photo was rock bottom, the absolute worst thing that could happen in this nightmare scenario. Then I got the message that proved I had drastically underestimated the situation. It came through Instagram DM the next evening, just as I was settling in with takeout Chinese food and trying to distract myself with mindless television. I recognized her profile picture immediately. The same woman whose bedroom my boyfriend was now calling home, whose space he was comfortable enough in to take provocative selfies. Hey, Victoria. Hope you don't mind me reaching out directly like this. I just wanted to clear the air about this whole situation because I think there might be some misunderstandings that are making this harder for everyone involved. My hands clenched around my phone as I read on, my appetite completely disappearing. I know this living arrangement is probably awkward for you, and I totally get that it might feel weird having your boyfriend stay with another woman, but I really think you're making this much more complicated and dramatic than it needs to be. He's just trying to help a friend in genuine need. And honestly, I think you should be proud of him for being such a caring, generous person, instead of making him feel guilty and conflicted about doing the right thing. The condescending tone was unmistakable, wrapped in false understanding and concern, but she wasn't finished. Maybe if you developed a bit of a spine and stopped creating unnecessary drama where there doesn't need to be any, this whole experience could actually bring you two closer together as a couple. Sometimes relationships get stronger when people learn to trust each other and support each other's friendships. Just my 2 cents from someone who's been watching this unfold. Hope you can find some perspective on this situation. XO. I read it 3 times, my anger building exponentially with each pass. The casual insult wrapped in friendly advice. The suggestion that I needed to develop a spine, like I was some weak, pathetic girlfriend who needed to toughen up and accept my boyfriend living with another woman. The implication that I was creating drama instead of having legitimate concerns about appropriate boundaries. But what really got me was how she positioned herself as the wise observer, the neutral party offering helpful relationship advice, when she was actively benefiting from an arrangement that excluded and diminished me. And that little XO at the end, like we were friends having a heart-to-heart instead of her lecturing me about how to be a better girlfriend. I screenshotted the message and immediately called him, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Did you know your roommate just sent me a personal message? What kind of message? About what? I read it to him word for word, my voice getting shakier and more incredulous with each patronizing line. When I finished, there was silence on the other end that stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Well, I demanded, Are you going to say anything about your friend insulting your girlfriend and giving me unsolicited relationship advice? I mean, he paused, and I could practically hear him choosing his words carefully. She's not wrong about some of it, Vic. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air out of my lungs. Excuse me? She told me to develop a spine, called me dramatic, and suggested I don't know how to support my own boyfriend, and you think she's not wrong? Look, I didn't ask her to message you. Ask her. And maybe she could have phrased some things more diplomatically. But she's genuinely worried about me. She sees how stressed and conflicted this situation is making me, and she cares about my well-being. She told me to develop a spine, I repeated, my voice cracking. She analyzed our relationship and told me how to be a better girlfriend. And you're defending that? Maybe that's not exactly how she should have put it, but Vic, you have been pretty dramatic about this whole thing. More dramatic than the situation really calls for. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My boyfriend was not only defending another woman's right to critique and insult me, but agreeing with her assessment of my character. So she gets to analyze our relationship dynamics and give me personal advice on how to improve my behavior? She's been my friend for 8 years. She knows me really well, probably better than anyone. And honestly, she has a valid point about you making this more difficult and complicated than it needs to be. She has a valid point? My voice was barely a whisper now. Your girlfriend of 2 years is upset about you moving in with another woman, and your solution is to let that woman lecture me about my personality flaws? She's trying to help smooth things over between us, trying to find a way for everyone to be comfortable with this arrangement. By insulting me? By telling me I need to fundamentally change my personality to accommodate your living situation with her? By suggesting that my emotional responses are invalid and overdramatic? By being honest about what she observes from the outside? Look, I know you don't want to hear this, but maybe an outside perspective is exactly what we need right now. Maybe someone who isn't emotionally invested in our relationship drama can see things more clearly. An outside perspective, from the woman he was now sharing a home with, eating meals with, waking up in the same space as every morning. The woman who felt comfortable enough to message his girlfriend with relationship advice and personal attacks disguised as friendly concern. So this is what we're doing now? I asked quietly. She gets a vote in our relationship? She gets to evaluate my behavior and suggest improvements? She gets to express concern for her friend when she sees him stressed and unhappy because of relationship conflicts. And I get to what? Shut up and smile while you two decide what's best for me? Accept her judgment of my character and work on developing a spine? You get to decide whether you want to trust me and support me in helping a friend, or keep fighting me on something that's already been decided and isn't going to change. The ultimatum was crystal clear and absolutely final. Fall in line with their assessment of the situation, accept his roommate's right to critique and advise me, or be labeled the problem girlfriend who couldn't handle her boyfriend helping a friend in need. I see, I said softly. Do you, though? Do you really see what's happening here? I did see. I saw exactly what was happening, exactly how I was being positioned and manipulated and dismissed. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I began forming a very different kind of plan. He texted me the next day asking if we could have dinner to talk things through properly. I agreed, foolishly hoping that maybe we could finally have an honest, productive conversation about our relationship and find some kind of resolution. I should have known better by then. We met at Bella Vista, the cozy Italian place where we'd celebrated our first anniversary just over a year ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, trying to save our relationship in the same spot where we'd once toasted our future together, where he'd told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He looked tired but determined as he sat across from me in the dim lighting, and I could tell from his posture and expression that he'd rehearsed whatever he was about to say. There was something almost businesslike about his demeanor, like this was a meeting rather than a conversation between two people who supposedly loved each other. I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few days, he began, cutting methodically into his chicken parmesan. And I've realized that this whole situation is really showing me who we are as people, what our core values actually are. What do you mean by that? I mean that when someone I care about desperately needed help, when they were facing a genuine crisis that could have dramatically impacted their life, my instinct was to help them immediately. No questions asked, no conditions attached, no elaborate negotiations about what I would get in return. He looked at me pointedly across the table. That's just who I am as a person. And your instinct was to make it entirely about you and our relationship, instead of recognizing someone else's genuine need. I felt the familiar sting of being painted as the villain in this narrative, but I stayed quiet and let him continue his prepared speech. So I've made a decision. I'm going through with this living arrangement, regardless of how you feel about it or what objections you might have. Because helping people, Being there for friends when they need me most isn't something I'm willing to compromise on or negotiate about, even for our relationship. Even for our relationship, I repeated slowly, letting the words sink in. So if I can't accept this situation, if I can't be comfortable with you living with another woman indefinitely, then what happens to us? Then we need to seriously evaluate whether we're compatible long-term as partners. He said it with the same casual tone he might use to discuss weekend plans. I need to be with someone who supports my values, someone who encourages me to be a good person, not someone who tries to control my friendships and limit my ability to help people who matter to me. And what about my values? What about my need to feel prioritized and respected and included in major decisions that affect our relationship? Your needs matter? Of course they do, but not when they prevent me from doing what's morally right, not when they conflict with basic human decency. I took a sip of wine, trying to process his words and the implications of what he was telling me. So you've essentially decided that your friendship with her is more important than our romantic relationship? I've decided that being a fundamentally good person is more important than being a convenient, accommodating boyfriend who prioritizes his girlfriend's insecurities over genuine human need. The insult was subtle but unmistakable. I was asking him to be convenient and accommodating rather than good and moral. And how does she feel about me visiting while you're staying there? About me being included in this arrangement that affects my relationship? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my direct gaze. Well, that's actually another thing we need to discuss realistically. She's dealing with an enormous amount of stress right now. Financial pressure, potential homelessness, job insecurity. Having extra people around, people who aren't directly helping with her situation, might add to her stress level and make things harder for her. Extra people? You mean your girlfriend of 2 years? I mean anyone who isn't directly contributing to solving her current crisis. I stared at him, the full picture finally coming into sharp, clear focus. So you're moving in with her? She gets to critique and analyze our relationship, and I'm banned from visiting or being part of this new living situation. You're not banned exactly, it's just complicated right now. The timing isn't ideal for social visits. Let me ask you something, I said, leaning forward across the small table. If I was the one moving in with my male best friend to help with his rent, and he told me he didn't want you coming around because it would stress him out and complicate his situation, how would you react to that? The question clearly caught him completely off guard. His mouth opened and closed several times, and I could see him struggling to find an answer that wouldn't expose his obvious hypocrisy. That's not really the same thing at all. How is it not exactly the same thing? Because you don't have a male best friend who's facing this kind of financial crisis. But if I did, if the situation was completely reversed? He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he searched for a response that would make sense. I could see the exact moment he realized there was no good answer that wouldn't contradict everything he'd been saying. The point is, he finally said, clearly frustrated, this is about helping someone in a genuine crisis situation. And if you can't support that basic principle, if you can't put someone else's welfare ahead of your own comfort, then maybe we're not as compatible as I thought we were. I nodded slowly, understanding finally settling over me like a heavy blanket. You're absolutely right. Maybe we're not compatible at all. For the first time all evening, he looked uncertain, almost surprised. What exactly does that mean? It means I'm going to do some serious thinking of my own about what I want and what I'm willing to accept in a relationship. Victoria. No, it's fine. You've made your position crystal clear. You've told me exactly where I stand in your priorities. And I appreciate the honesty. He looked confused, like this wasn't the response he'd been expecting or prepared for. That night, lying alone in our bed while he was presumably settling into his new living arrangement, something fundamental shifted inside me. I'd spent weeks trying to reason with him, trying to make him see my perspective, trying to salvage a relationship that he'd already emotionally checked out of. I was exhausted from fighting a battle where I was apparently the only one who actually wanted to win. So I decided to stop fighting his way and start playing by his rules instead. The next morning, he texted me a photo of him carrying boxes up the stairs to her apartment building. Moving day officially. Wish me luck getting everything organized and settled in. Instead of the hurt or angry response he was probably expecting, the kind of emotional reaction that would validate his narrative about my dramatic tendencies, I replied with carefully crafted sweetness. How exciting for both of you. I'm sure she really appreciates having such a dedicated, selfless friend to help her through this difficult time. You're such a fundamentally good person for sacrificing your own comfort to help someone in genuine need. So proud of your generosity. It took him 20 minutes to respond, and I could practically feel his confusion radiating through the phone. Thanks? That's really mature of you. He'd been braced for another fight, another emotional conversation about boundaries and respect and inclusion. Instead, I was giving him exactly what he'd claimed to want: enthusiastic support for his noble mission to help a friend in crisis. Later that day, he sent another update. Got the living room completely set up and organized. She made this incredible dinner to thank me for everything. So nice to finally be appreciated for trying to do the right thing. I replied immediately, maintaining my new approach. That's absolutely wonderful. It must be such a relief for her to have someone she can count on completely. And how thoughtful of her to take such good care of you in return. You two make such a perfect team. I'm so happy you're both getting what you need from this arrangement. This time it took him over an hour to respond. And all he managed was, yeah, it's nice. But I wasn't done yet. When he called me that evening, I could hear the uncertainty and confusion in his voice from the first word. Hey, how was your day? You seem different in your texts. Oh, it was absolutely lovely. I had such a productive day at work. And then I grabbed drinks with some colleagues after. It's amazing how much energy and clarity you have when you're not worrying about things you can't control or trying to change other people's minds. Okay, that's good, I guess. You seem much more upbeat than I expected. I thought you'd be more upset about me officially moving in today. Why would I be upset? I asked with genuine-sounding surprise. You made it very clear that this is about helping someone in desperate need and being a fundamentally good person. I've had some time to really think about everything you said, and you're absolutely right. I was being selfish and insecure and possessive. The silence on his end was absolutely deafening. So you're completely okay with this living arrangement now? More than okay. I'm actually excited for you both. It's going to be such an incredible growth experience, living with someone new and navigating a completely different dynamic. Learning to be independent and self-sufficient. And who knows? Maybe it'll teach us both some valuable lessons about trust and personal space and supporting each other's friendships. Right. Lessons. He sounded completely thrown off balance, like he was trying to navigate a conversation in a foreign language. Actually, I've been thinking about doing some growing and expanding of my own. I realized I've been way too dependent on you for my happiness and my entire social life. It's probably really healthy for both of us to branch out significantly, don't you think? Branch out how exactly? The jealousy in his voice was unmistakable and immediate. After weeks of him dismissing my concerns about boundaries and appropriate friendships, he was suddenly very interested in my social plans and personal growth. Oh, just reconnecting with old friends I've lost touch with, maybe exploring some new interests and activities. I've actually been meaning to reach out to some people who used to be important to me. What people specifically? Just friends, I said with the same casual, dismissive tone he'd used when talking about his roommate situation. People who care about my well-being and want to see me happy and fulfilled. Victoria, I should probably go. I have some important calls to make and some plans to organize. Have a wonderful evening with your roommate. I hope you're both really enjoying this new chapter. I hung up before he could respond, and for the first time in weeks, I was genuinely smiling. The game had officially changed, and I was finally ready to play by the new rules he'd established. I hadn't talked to my ex-boyfriend in over a year, but I remembered him mentioning during one of our final arguments how at least he never tried to control who I spent time with, and how he trusted me to have healthy friendships with everyone. It seemed like the perfect time to test whether those principles applied in reverse. I found his number buried in my old contacts and sent what I hoped was a casual, friendly text. Hey, been thinking about old friends lately and wondering how you've been doing. Want to grab coffee sometime and catch up properly? He responded within an hour, which felt like a good sign. Victoria, what a pleasant surprise to hear from you. I'd absolutely love to catch up and see how life's been treating you. How about that little place on 5th Street tomorrow afternoon around 2? The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, filled with the typical mix of students, remote workers, and people having casual meetings. I spotted him immediately at a corner table. He looked good, relaxed, and confident, with the kind of genuine smile that said he was actually happy to see me rather than just being polite. You look fantastic, he said, standing to give me a warm hug that felt completely natural and unforced. It's really good to see you. Victoria, I've wondered how you were doing. We talked for nearly 3 hours, and it was like rediscovering a language I'd forgotten I could speak. We discussed work, life changes, the different paths we'd taken since our relationship ended. He asked thoughtful questions about my career, remembered details about my family that I'd mentioned years ago, and never once made me feel like my thoughts or feelings were invalid or overly dramatic. "So, how are things with your current boyfriend?" he asked eventually, stirring his second cappuccino. "Complicated," I said, and found myself telling him the entire story. Not to complain or seek validation, but because he'd asked with genuine interest and seemed to actually care about my well-being and happiness. "Wow," he said when I finished, shaking his head slowly. "That sounds incredibly frustrating and emotionally exhausting." He says I'm being selfish and possessive for having concerns about it. For having feelings about your boyfriend moving in with another woman? He looked genuinely incredulous. "That's not selfish, Victoria. That's completely human and reasonable. Any person in a committed relationship would have serious concerns about that kind of arrangement." It had been so long since someone had validated my perspective without qualification or criticism that I almost started crying right there in the busy coffee shop. I took a photo of us at the coffee shop. Nothing romantic or suggestive, just two old friends catching up over lattes. But I made sure to get a good angle that showed both of us looking relaxed and happy, and posted it to my Instagram story with the caption, "Sometimes the best conversations happen with people who actually listen and care." My phone buzzed with a text from my boyfriend within 10 minutes. "Who is that in your story?" "Just catching up with an old friend," I replied casually. "Remember? I told you I was going to branch out socially and reconnect with people who care about my well-being." "What old friend?" "I don't recognize him." "Someone who genuinely cares about my happiness and wants to see me thriving, just like you said you wanted for me." He called immediately, and I could hear the tension in his voice from the first word. "Victoria, who were you with today?" "A friend," I said calmly, maintaining the same tone he'd used when discussing his living arrangements. "We had coffee and talked about life and relationships. It was really refreshing to have a conversation with someone who doesn't think my feelings are invalid or overly dramatic." "What friend, Victoria? I need you to be specific." "Someone I used to date, if you must know the details. But we're just friends now, obviously. Surely you of all people can understand that it's completely possible to have a healthy, appropriate friendship with someone you used to be romantically involved with." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "You went out with your ex-boyfriend?" "I went out with a friend who happens to be an ex, just like you're living with a friend who happens to be an attractive woman you've known for 8 years. What's the difference, really?" "The difference is..." He stopped abruptly, clearly realizing that any argument he made would completely contradict everything he'd been saying about his own situation. "The difference is what?" I asked sweetly, genuinely curious to hear how he'd try to rationalize this. "Just be careful, okay? I worry about your judgment sometimes, especially when you're feeling emotional and vulnerable." My judgment. This from the man who was living with another woman who'd banned his girlfriend from visiting and felt entitled to critique our relationship dynamics. "Thanks for your concern," I said. "I really appreciate you caring about my well-being. I'll talk to you later. I actually have dinner plans tonight." I didn't have dinner plans, but he didn't need to know that. The seed of uncertainty was planted, and I was just getting started. Over the next week, my ex and I met up 4 more times. And I documented each outing with the same careful attention to detail that my boyfriend had used when sending me updates from his new living arrangement. Lunch on Wednesday, a museum visit on Saturday, dinner on Sunday, and a long walk through the park on Tuesday. Each encounter was perfectly innocent. We were genuinely enjoying each other's company as friends and nothing more. But I made sure to capture and share each moment strategically. A photo of our lunch with the caption, "Great minds discuss great ideas and support each other's growth." A shot of us laughing at something in the Contemporary Art Museum, finding joy and beauty in unexpected places. A cozy dinner photo with soft lighting, good food, even better conversation, and the kind of friendship that nourishes the soul. My boyfriend's responses became increasingly frantic and desperate with each post. Wednesday. "Another lunch? How often are you planning to see this guy exactly?" Saturday. "A museum visit? That seems pretty date-like for people who are supposedly just friends." Sunday. "Dinner now too? Victoria, this is getting completely ridiculous and inappropriate." Tuesday. "You're with him again? This is happening way too frequently." Each time I responded using his own logic and language turned back on him, word for word. "I'm just helping a friend who's been going through some serious relationship stress and emotional turmoil lately. You should be proud of me for being such a caring, supportive person. It's not date-like, it's friend-like. I thought you understood better than anyone that men and women could maintain completely appropriate platonic friendships. I'm just being there emotionally for someone who needs genuine support right now. Isn't that exactly what good friends do for each other?" He's going through a difficult time and needs someone who actually listens to his concerns. I'm just being a fundamentally good person. By Tuesday evening, he was calling me multiple times throughout the day, his voice getting more strained and desperate with each conversation. Victoria, we seriously need to talk about this situation with your ex-boyfriend. What situation exactly? I'm spending time with a friend who genuinely cares about my well-being and emotional health. I thought you'd be happy and proud that I'm not being so dependent on you for all my social and emotional needs. But you're with him constantly. This is getting obsessive. 4 times in a week is hardly constantly. You live with your friend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Surely you can understand that I might need some emotional support and validation during this particularly difficult time in our relationship? That's completely different. And you know it. How exactly? I asked, using the same question that had consistently stumped him before. Because he's your ex-boyfriend. You used to be romantically involved. And she's an attractive woman you've been emotionally intimate with for 8 years. If anything, that sounds like a much deeper and more potentially threatening connection than my situation. We're not dating. We never dated. Neither are we. We're just friends. Friends who understand each other deeply and have a history of mutual respect, support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. I could practically hear him grinding his teeth through the phone. Victoria, I'm completely serious. This behavior needs to stop immediately. What behavior needs to stop? Me having a support system? Me spending time with people who actually listen to my concerns instead of dismissing them as dramatic and unreasonable? You're doing this specifically to get back at me, and we both know it. I'm doing this because you taught me some really valuable lessons about the importance of helping friends in need and not letting relationship insecurities get in the way of doing what's morally right. My voice remained perfectly sweet and reasonable. Remember? You told me I needed to develop a spine and stop being so possessive and controlling. The silence stretched for so long I started to wonder if he'd hung up in frustration. Please, he said finally, and his voice sounded smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. Can we please just talk about this properly? In person? Face to face? I'd absolutely love to, but I'm actually meeting my friend for coffee in about an hour. He's been having some really intense emotional revelations about relationships and personal growth. Maybe tomorrow? Cancel it? Please just cancel it? Cancel it? But he's expecting me. He's counting on me being there for him. I can't just abandon a friend who's depending on my support. That would be incredibly selfish and heartless, don't you think? When I posted the coffee shop photo that evening, both of us deep in animated conversation, laughing genuinely at something he'd said, my phone didn't stop buzzing for 30 minutes straight. Text after text, each one more desperate and unhinged than the last. We need to talk right now. This is getting completely out of hand. Victoria, please call me back immediately. I'm coming over to your apartment. Why aren't you answering your phone? This is destroying our relationship. I responded to the final message with perfect simplicity. Out with a friend. Having such meaningful conversations. Talk tomorrow. The irony was absolutely delicious. For weeks, he'd dismissed my concerns, invalidated my feelings, and prioritized his living situation with another woman over my comfort and emotional security. Now, faced with the exact same scenario playing out in reverse, he was completely falling apart. But the most beautiful part? I wasn't actually doing anything wrong or inappropriate. I was genuinely enjoying reconnecting with someone who treated me with consistent respect and kindness. The fact that it was driving my boyfriend to the edge of sanity was just an incredibly satisfying bonus that made every moment even sweeter. The more time I spent with my ex, the more I realized how much I'd forgotten about what it felt like to be genuinely valued and respected as a person. It wasn't just that he listened to me, though that was revolutionary after months of being dismissed and invalidated. It was the quality of how he listened, the way he engaged with my thoughts and feelings like they actually mattered. When I mentioned being stressed about an important work presentation, he followed up 2 days later to ask specifically how it had gone and whether I was happy with the outcome. When I said I was thinking about redecorating my apartment to make it feel more like my own space again, he sent me links to furniture stores and design blogs he thought matched my aesthetic, along with encouraging messages about creating a sanctuary that reflected my personality. These weren't grand romantic gestures or attempts to win me back. They were basic expressions of human decency and care, the kind of attention and consideration I should have been receiving consistently from my actual boyfriend. "You seem so much lighter lately," he said during our Thursday evening walk through Riverside Park, different from when we first started hanging out again a couple weeks ago. "I feel different," I admitted, surprised by my own honesty. I think I'd completely forgotten what it felt like to have my thoughts and feelings actually matter to someone, to be treated like my perspective has value. They should always matter, especially to someone who claims to love you and want to build a life with you. I stopped walking and turned to face him directly. Can I ask you something personal? When we were together 2 years ago, did I seem needy or possessive or overly dramatic to you? He looked genuinely surprised by the question, almost taken aback. Needy? Victoria, you were one of the most independent, self-sufficient people I knew. That's actually part of why our relationship didn't work out. You were so focused on your career goals and personal growth that sometimes I felt like I was competing for your attention and emotional energy. The contrast hit me like a physical blow, making me actually dizzy for a moment. 2 years ago, I'd been too independent and self-focused. Now, according to my current boyfriend, I was too clingy and dependent and possessive. What had changed so dramatically between then and now? He's really done a number on your self-perception, hasn't he? My ex said gently, reading the confusion and pain on my face. I felt tears prick my eyes as the full reality of what had happened to me began to sink in. I used to be so confident in my own judgment. I used to trust my instincts about people and situations. Now I second-guess everything I think and feel, wondering if I'm being too sensitive or too demanding or too emotional. That's not your fault. And it's not a reflection of who you actually are. That's what happens when someone consistently tells you that your natural, healthy responses are wrong or inappropriate. We sat down on a bench overlooking the river, and I found myself really thinking about the past 2 years for the first time with any kind of clarity. When exactly had I stopped believing in myself? When had I started accepting being called dramatic for having normal emotional responses to concerning situations? I don't think I can keep doing this, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. Seeing me, I completely understand if this is getting complicated. No, not this, I said, gesturing vaguely toward my phone, which had been buzzing constantly with increasingly desperate and angry messages. That. I can't keep pretending that relationship is salvageable or healthy. He nodded slowly, thoughtfully. What are you thinking about doing? I honestly don't know yet, but I know with absolute certainty that I deserve better than someone who makes me feel crazy for having basic relationship expectations and boundaries. For the first time in months, I believe that was actually true. And for the first time since this entire nightmare had started, I felt like I had the power to choose what came next, instead of just reacting to decisions other people made for me. When I finally turned my phone back on that evening, I discovered I had 23 missed calls and 67 text messages. The progression from confusion to anger to desperation to outright panic was almost fascinating to watch unfold in real time. Why aren't you answering your phone? This is completely ridiculous. Victoria, you're being incredibly childish and manipulative. I'm starting to get worried about you. Please just call me back so we can talk like adults. I think we should have a serious conversation about this situation. I miss you. I miss us. I'm sorry if I haven't been as attentive as I should have been lately. Maybe I made a mistake with this whole living arrangement thing. Victoria, please, I love you and I don't want to lose you. I'm willing to reconsider some things if you'll just talk to me. This is tearing me apart. Please don't throw away everything we've built together. The manipulation was so transparent and predictable it was almost insulting to my intelligence. Months of dismissing my concerns, calling me selfish and insecure and possessive, and now suddenly he was worried about being inattentive. Now he was reconsidering the living arrangement he'd insisted was completely non-negotiable. Now he was willing to discuss things he'd previously declared were final decisions. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Let him stew in the uncertainty he'd created. The next morning, he showed up at my office building with an enormous bouquet of roses and expensive coffee from the boutique place I'd mentioned liking months ago. My coworkers were visibly impressed by what appeared to be a grand romantic gesture, but I could see it for exactly what it was. A public display designed to put social pressure on me to respond positively and make me look unreasonable if I didn't. Can we please talk? He asked when I met him in the lobby, looking deliberately pitiful and desperate. I've been going crazy not hearing from you. I'm at work, I said calmly, accepting the flowers with polite but distant thanks. Then lunch? Or dinner? Or coffee after work? Whenever works for you. Victoria, this silence between us is absolutely killing me. What's killing you exactly? This distance between us. This game you're playing with me. I'm not playing any kind of game. I'm living my life and spending time with people who treat me with respect and kindness. Isn't that exactly what you wanted? For me to be less emotionally dependent on you? Not like this. Not with him. Like what? Like having meaningful conversations with someone who values my thoughts? Like being appreciated and validated instead of constantly criticized? His jaw tightened visibly, and I could see him struggling to maintain his composure in the public setting. With your ex-boyfriend, someone you used to sleep with a friend who happens to be an ex, just like you're living with a friend who happens to be an attractive woman. I thought you understood better than anyone that men and women could maintain appropriate platonic relationships. It's completely different and you know it. How exactly? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly recognizing the logical trap. Any argument he made about the inappropriateness of my friendship would completely contradict his entire justification for living with his female friend. The opportunity for the perfect finale came when he insisted on a video call to clear the air and resolve this situation like mature adults. He wanted his roommate and several of their mutual friends to join the call, thinking that public pressure and group intervention would force me to be reasonable and stop my destructive behavior. I agreed immediately and enthusiastically. It was exactly the audience I wanted for what I was about to do. When the call connected at 8 p.m. sharp, I could see him on screen along with his roommate and 4 other people I recognized from our social circle. Everyone looked tense and prepared, like they were staging an intervention for someone with a serious addiction problem. "Victoria," he began in his most serious, concerned voice, "we all care about you deeply, and we're genuinely concerned about the direction your behavior is heading lately." "How incredibly thoughtful of all of you," I said sweetly, smiling brightly at the camera. "I actually have some really exciting news to share with everyone while we're all here together." His face immediately went pale, and I could see panic flickering in his eyes. "What news?" "Well, you know how you've been encouraging me to be more independent and branch out socially?" I smiled even more brightly. "I've been taking your advice seriously. In fact, my friend and I are planning the most incredible romantic trip to Italy next month." The silence was absolutely deafening. I could see everyone on the call exchange glances. "What trip exactly?" he managed to choke out, his voice barely audible. "A 3-week romantic getaway to Rome and Florence." He's been researching all these amazing restaurants and museums and hidden gems. "We're staying at this absolutely gorgeous boutique hotel in Trastevere with a private rooftop terrace overlooking the entire city." I pulled out my laptop and started scrolling through the booking confirmations, describing every luxurious detail. 3 incredible weeks of world-class art, amazing wine, incredible food, and someone who actually appreciates my company and values my thoughts. I watched his face crumble in real time, but I was nowhere near finished. "You know what's really funny, though," I continued, my voice still perfectly pleasant and conversational. "While I was learning to value myself again and remember what healthy relationships actually look like, I started seeing your situation much more clearly, too. Victoria, don't... No, this is actually really good. Everyone should hear this analysis." I looked directly at his roommate through the screen. "I realized that you're not actually helping a friend in need at all. You're being used as a live-in boyfriend without any of the commitment or emotional reciprocity. Someone who pays half the bills, provides constant emotional support, handles household responsibilities, and asks for absolutely nothing real in return." Her face flushed deep red. "That's not..." "Oh, but it absolutely is," I interrupted smoothly. "Think about it logically. You get all the practical benefits of a devoted partner. Someone who prioritizes your needs over his actual girlfriend's feelings. Someone who defends you against anyone who questions the arrangement. Someone who's essentially moved in with you and provides financial support, but you don't have to give him anything genuine or meaningful in return." The other friends on the call were shifting uncomfortably, clearly recognizing the uncomfortable truth in what I was saying. "And the most beautiful part?" I continued, looking directly back at my soon-to-be ex-boyfriend. "When someone better comes along, or when you get tired of the arrangement, or when it's no longer convenient, you can just kick him out without any real consequences. After all, you're not actually together, right? You don't owe him anything substantial." His roommate's expression had shifted from defensive to calculating, and I could see him starting to realize that I was probably describing their dynamic with uncomfortable accuracy. "You're being used as an expensive, convenient doormat," I said directly to him, my voice still calm and analytical. "And the moment it suits her purposes, you'll be discarded and replaced just like any other household appliance that's outlived its usefulness." "That's not true," he said, but his voice completely lacked conviction. He was looking at his roommate desperately, waiting for her to deny my assessment. She said absolutely nothing. "Victoria," he tried again, his voice breaking slightly. "We can fix this. Cancel the trip. Come home to me. We can work through all of this together." "Come home?" I laughed, and it felt genuinely joyful and liberating. To what, exactly? To a relationship where I'm called selfish for having normal human feelings? Where my concerns are dismissed as drama and manipulation? Where I'm expected to gratefully accept whatever scraps of attention you have left over from your real priority? I leaned closer to the camera, making sure everyone could see my face clearly. I'm completely done accepting scraps and making excuses for disrespect. I'm done with someone who makes me feel insane for expecting basic consideration. And I'm especially done with someone who's too blind to see that he's being played by someone who will never actually choose him. I could see tears in his eyes now, but I felt nothing except pure relief and freedom. Enjoy your living arrangement, I said to both of them. I hope you both get exactly what you deserve from it. And then I ended the call and blocked every single one of them on every platform I could think of. 3 weeks later, I was sitting on the private rooftop terrace of our boutique hotel in Trastevere, watching the sunset paint ancient Rome in brilliant shades of gold and amber. The Tiber wound through the city below us like a ribbon of light, and the sound of animated Italian conversations drifted up from the cobblestone streets. For the first time in over a year, I felt completely and genuinely at peace with myself and my life. "You look truly happy," my ex said, handing me a glass of exceptional local wine we'd discovered at a tiny family vineyard outside the city. "I am happy," I realized with surprise. Genuinely, completely, authentically happy in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The trip had exceeded every promise I'd made during that devastating video call. We'd wandered through the Vatican museums for hours, eaten incredible meals at family restaurants tucked away in hidden alleys, spent entire afternoons exploring ancient ruins and discussing philosophy and life. But more importantly, I'd spent 3 weeks rediscovering who I was when I wasn't constantly defending my right to have feelings and opinions. "I need to tell you something," I said as we watched the lights begin to twinkle across the eternal city. "Should I be worried?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I don't think we should get back together romantically." He raised an eyebrow, looking more amused than hurt. "That's your big confession?" "I think I'm more relieved than insulted, honestly." "Really?" "Victoria, we're incredible friends. We have amazing conversations. We genuinely enjoy each other's company, and we clearly care about each other's well-being. But we broke up for legitimate reasons the first time around." He smiled warmly. "This trip has reminded me of all the things I loved about you as a person, and also reinforced why we weren't right for each other as romantic partners." The relief was overwhelming and immediate. "So what does this make us going forward?" "Whatever we want it to be. Friends who occasionally take amazing trips together. People who care about each other without all the pressure and expectations and complications of a traditional romantic relationship." That sounds absolutely perfect. And it did. After 2 years of fighting desperately for scraps of attention and basic respect, the idea of a connection based on mutual enjoyment and genuine care, rather than obligation and manipulation, felt revolutionary. My phone had been blissfully quiet for the past 10 days. In the immediate aftermath of our video call confrontation, my ex-boyfriend had sent dozens of increasingly unhinged messages ranging from angry accusations to pathetic pleading, to threats about what he would do to win me back. I'd blocked his number after the 3rd day of harassment, but mutual friends had kept me updated on the spectacular implosion of his living situation. Apparently, my analysis of their dynamic had been even more accurate than I'd realized. Within 5 days of our call, his roommate had started bringing home dates and making it abundantly clear that his presence was becoming inconvenient and unwelcome. She'd asked him to move out within the week, citing her need for privacy and space to explore new relationships. He'd been forced to move back in with his parents at age 22, homeless and heartbroken, finally understanding what it felt like to be discarded by someone who'd never actually valued him as anything more than a convenient solution to her problems. I felt no satisfaction in his pain, but I felt tremendous satisfaction in my freedom and clarity. "You know what I realized during all of this?" I told my companion as we finished our wine and prepared to head to dinner at yet another incredible restaurant he'd discovered. "What's that?" I spent so much time and energy trying to convince him that I deserved basic respect and consideration that I completely forgot I could just leave and find those things somewhere else. I forgot that I had the power to choose what I would and wouldn't accept. And now? Now I know exactly what I'm worth, and I'll never accept less than that again. Not from anyone, not for any reason. The next morning, I posted a photo of myself at the Trevi fountain, throwing in a coin and making a wish. The caption read simply, "New beginnings deserve new dreams." For the first time in my adult life, I was completely single, completely free, and completely confident in my own worth and judgment. Whatever came next in my life, I knew it would be on my terms, with someone who recognized my value instead of trying to diminish it. The girl who had sat in that apartment folding laundry while being called selfish for having basic relationship expectations was gone forever. In her place was a woman who knew exactly what she deserved and had the strength to demand it without apology. And that transformation, I thought as I threw my coin into the ancient fountain and watched it disappear into the clear water, was the most satisfying revenge of all. Not hurting him, but healing myself. Not destroying his life, but reclaiming my own. The woman I was now would never tolerate being treated as an afterthought again, and that was worth more than any apology he could ever offer.